Hi, welcome to my 15 cards in 1 hour online class. I'm Jess from jesscrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So today we are going to use 3 pieces of 12 by 12 paper to make 15 cards in about an hour. I can't guarantee that it will only take you an hour, but I'm going to provide you as many tips and tricks to make that possible. Now, the video for this class is free for everyone to watch, and I really believe you'll be able to make the projects with just the video. I am going to offer a paid supplemental workbook that will include the templates for you to print out. And so if you want to take this project on the go or just have those templates available to you for easier use, then you can pick up that workbook, and the link will be in the video description to my Etsy shop. But this class is going to be absolutely perfect for beginners because I break down every single step, including making the card bases. We're using very minimal supplies. You can just pick up a handful of things, and I will talk about some modifications you can make if you don't have as many supplies if you're just starting out. So let's get making. Let's talk about the supplies you will need to get started. I have the cutting template and sketches that are provided with the class. So this is an exclusive to the class. You can download it and print it out or have it available on a screen nearby for reference. You're going to have a cutting template, and there's going to be 2 sketches. I have put them on individual sheets of paper so that you can print them larger, make the numbers easier to see, and it might be helpful for organizing later, and we'll discuss that in the class, but you'll want all of that available. Then you're going to need 3 sheets of 12 by 12 paper. The paper that I have today is double-sided, but that is not necessary, and I will not be using it as double-sided. I will only be using one side. I recommend a pattern paper that has a relatively small scale, nothing too large, and has an overall print. It can be directional. So if you have a pattern paper that has words on it or some other print where there's a clear top and bottom of the paper, that is absolutely okay. This template does work with directional paper. I am asking to have 3 sheets to make all 15 cards. While technically 1 sheet does make 5 cards, because you are putting the patterns on top of each other, if you only had 1 sheet of single-sided paper, you'd be layering the same paper on top of itself. If you would like to continue on after this class and do this and use this template and sketch again for an additional set of cards, I would recommend at least having, if you're doing 1 sheet of paper, doing double-sided paper. If not, then you're just going to have 3 sheets every time. Double or single-sided absolutely works. And again, directional pattern works, which was very important to me because I know that gives you more options in terms of the paper that you can choose. You're going to need, this one is going to cause my camera to unfocus, so I'm going to just show it underneath the pattern paper. You're going to need 8 sheets of your preferred size of cardstock. I'm going to work in American sizes. So I am taking 8.5 by 11 cardstock. And if you want to make A6 cards, sorry, but I forgot the name of that paper, but you can absolutely make A6 cards instead. So if you have, I think it's A4 paper or A4 cardstock outside of the US, you can make them into A6 cards instead. And so that's that option. But I have 8 sheets, and that is what you will need. And you can then use all of the rest of the measurements exactly as it says on the sketch, but then just put everything on top of the A6 cards, and I'll show you what that looks like in the videos. Then you need a paper trimmer. There's many out there, and technically you could do this with a ruler and an X-Acto knife, or a ruler and a scissor, and that's absolutely up to you, but we are going to be cutting very specific measurements, and so a paper trimmer of any style can be quite helpful. You're going to need some way to adhere your pattern paper onto your card. I'm going to use my Scotch Advanced Tape Glider, and all of these supplies will be in a blog post, and you'll know exactly what you need, and there'll be links so that you can follow them and easily find the supplies. I do have a coupon code for refills for the Scotch Advanced Tape Glider, and I'll include that as well for you guys. But any tape roller that you have, a lot of glues will work well. You will want to consider a glue that doesn't cause your paper to ripple or bubble up, but whatever is your preferred adhesive. A few more supplies. This is optional. a scoring board, and a bone folder. This is going to help me to make my card bases from the 8.5 by 11 cardstock. You don't need this, you can simply fold them in half. Those are optional supplies. Then I am going to be stamping my sentiments. So in order to do that, I will need a set with small sentiments. That's what I recommend, but you can be pretty flexible about that. A colored ink or a black ink, really any kind of just a color of ink. I'm gonna choose a colored ink because that's my preference, and a stamp block to stamp them with. You could, of course, use a stamp positioner. There's many choices out there, but I will, of course, link what I personally chose. This is a very flexible class, though. Finally, you will need some matching ephemera. So this is the same line as the paper I chose. I'm working with the Vicky Bouton Peppermint Kisses line today, so I got the embellishments that go with it. There are 50 pieces. I will probably only use 15 in today's class, one for each card, but it is nice to have some additional options, and many pattern paper include this. Now, if you cannot find ephemera that specifically matches, so ephemera is just like little die cut pictures that specifically match your cardstock, there are some other options. You can go to your stamp collection and stamp and color some things that match. Now that, of course, is going to take additional time, and so it may not be able to keep it to the under 1 hour mark. I'm saying that with ephemera, but you also could look on a website like Creative Fabrica, and that you'll be able to download clip art that you could then put in a Word document, print, and cut out yourself or with an electronic die cutter, and then use those. You could make embellishments from your die cuts. But I'm going to recommend ephemera because that's what's going to allow us to keep it in that smaller time period, that under 1 hour, and I think it's very, very beginner friendly. Final thing I'm going to show you is an optional supply that I'm going to use for organizing. I have these plastic folders, and they open up and I can slip an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and anything smaller inside of them. And there's also these zipper pockets, and I will show you how I organize with these later, but these are absolutely optional, not necessary. You could use a Ziploc bag, and if you're creating it all in real time, you probably don't need to do anything with them. You can just make 2 piles on your work surface, but I do like to include how, for those who might want to break this class down over time and do, maybe 15 minutes a day or something, how you would organize the supplies to keep everything together. So we are ready to begin cutting and assembling all of our pieces. In order to keep things organized, I am going to put Sketch 1 and Sketch 2 in their own plastic envelope so that I can put all the pieces that go with each one together and organized. And then I'm going to make my necessary card bases, and because I know how many I'm going to make of each card, I am going to put that many card bases in each one. So each piece of pattern paper makes 3 cards with Sketch 1. So that means I need 9 card bases for this folder for Sketch 1, and then an additional 6 card bases for Sketch 2. Let's make our card bases as well in real time. So I'm going to try to keep my hand on here so that my camera does not focus in and out of the white paper because it doesn't know what to look at. You can cut multiple card bases at one time if you have a guillotine or other paper trimmer that's heavy duty. You're going to want to cut your card bases to, I start with an 8.5 by 11. I take the 11-inch side and I cut it to 5.5. Then I'm going to score it. It is slightly faster if you have a large scoring board to score your cardstock first. So then in that case, if you had a larger scoring board, you could score down the entire 11-inch side at that 4 1/4 mark and then cut it in half. And then they would already have that score mark once they were cut. I do not have a scoring board of that size to use. So I'm going to do it this way. We're going to cut each of these to 5.5. You're going to be able to do this probably a little bit faster than I am because I am making sure that I'm trying to be like clear and talking. So I am going to show you cutting 2 card bases at once, or 2 sheets of cardstock at once, because that's going to save me a little bit of time. You can choose if that's a good fit for you. If not, it might slow down the process by a minute or 2. Nothing too drastic. One last set here. Now, when you do this, you're going to make 15 card bases, but you're actually going to have 1/2 sheet of cardstock left over. Put that to the side. We are going to use that. Okay. Then we're going to need to score all of these card bases, which again, I'm going to do in real time with you because I want you to feel like this can be really successful. I know for some of you, you're going to think, well, I know how to make card bases, or I already have a bunch of card bases made, and you are welcome to skip this part of the class. However, again, it's more about like that really beginner friendly and showing you that it's really possible in this limited amount of time by us doing it together. I am taking each one of my card bases, I am putting it in my scoring board. There is, on this scoring board, there is a mark at A2, which is 4 1/4. And so I'm using that, and there actually is a mark for A6 on this one as well. So if you do cut your A6 card bases. Now, I will list the measurements for A6 probably in the materials if possible, but those of you who make A6 card bases, you're going to know your standard measurements. I believe though that, I don't want to say it because I don't want to be wrong, but I will show you in a second that what an A6 card base will look like once it is completed, and we can talk about that. But I want to make sure, that this is really friendly for everyone, including those who don't use American standard cardstock. Okay, so we've scored all of them. Then we're going to take all of them, fold, and run our bone folder along that edge. And then I'm going to count out 6 for my first one and 9 for the next one. You can actually like fold a couple of them in a row like this. And I said that the scoring board was optional. And that means that instead of using a scoring board, you could absolutely just take your piece of cardstock and line up the 2 edges like this and fold it in half. Now I'm being aided by the fact that I have a score mark there, but that is absolutely a valid way, especially if you're just beginning card making, you're not sure this is the craft for you, do I want to invest in a scoreboard? Now, once you decide it is, I really do recommend a scoreboard. I think scoreboards are great. Oh, that's my piece I wasn't supposed to fold. Okay, I got excited talking to you guys. So, we're going to make sure that you can use your finger, you can use the scoring tool. Again, just crease them all. We need 2, 4, 6 for sketch 2. And the other 9 go into a folder for sketch 1. Again, you could just be making piles, or you could be using like a gallon-sized Ziploc bag or something like that. Now we have this extra piece of cardstock, and what I'm going to do is cut it to 1/2-inch strips. The reason I'm going to do this is because this is what we are going to stamp our sentiments on. So if you are using a different size of cardstock, or a different stamp set, you might have to make a little bit of adjustment. But I know that these sentiments that I have chosen, and there are many stamp sets similar to this, where they have very small sentiments, that each of these sentiments is going to be able to fit on a 1/2-inch strip. So I'm just going to cut a bunch of 1/2-inch strips. And the way that I like to do it is to just bring my paper 1/2 inch off the edge of the trimmer. So I brought it from 8.5 to 8, 8 to 7.5 to 7 to 6.5, and etc. until I've cut enough strips. I'm going to guess that I can cut only 8 of these and be fine, because I only am going to need 15 sentiments, and I am going to assume that I can get 2 sentiments on each of these strips that are 5.5 by 1/2 inch. But I may as well cut some extra in case I have any stamping mistakes, and you might like to do that as well. Okay, so now we are all finished with our cardstock. We have a pile of strips and then all of those card bases that are organized in our folders. Final note on the cutting card bases phase. This is what the ultimate result of using A6 cardstock is. We can compare it later to the A2, but as you can see, everything fits on this. You do not need to cut anything differently except your card bases. Next up, we want to stamp some sentiments. So we're gonna take some of those 1/2-inch strips. I'm gonna lay a whole bunch of them out. I'm gonna pick one sentiment and stamp it across all of them. And this is to save me time. But I also think that it can be great to have multiples of the same card, because when you're sending holiday cards, Christmas cards, you often are sending the same card to multiple people. That's very traditional. And even if you're making these as, say, birthday cards or another holiday, the same thing is very valid. You can send the same birthday card to many people. I would just try not to send them the same card year to year. Perhaps if you're making these for your birthday, that you have to send to for the year, you would prefer to keep track of who got sketch 1 and who got sketch 2, and then the next year send them the opposite one, so you can make enough for 2 years, but you know, still make sure each person has a unique card each year, that they're not getting the same one. Of course, you can mix up the pattern papers as well. I'm gonna stamp an excess amount of these. I am not going to stamp the exact 15 that I need for the card, because as mentioned, there's going to be a possibility of mistakes. There's gonna be a chance I don't stamp everything like straight or even. And while I don't mind imperfections, because these are handmade cards, if like I, you know, miss a significant chunk of the sentiment, like you can't read the sentiments, the stamping is so bad, I'll want to discard that one. Or if I stamp it really, really crooked, maybe I would want to not use that one. Now what I'm doing here is, this is all just eyeballing, and I'm stamping it such that there's going to be a little bit of room on each side of the sentiment so that I could cut a little banner, I could center it left or right or across a card, and I have some options. And I can be flexible about what I do in the end, and also if I make a miscut, like say I'm ready to put it onto a card and then I cut it a little too close, I cut part of the sentiment off, I don't know, like mistakes happen, I'll have plenty of extra. And this might seem preemptive because this is, you know, sometimes we think of the sentiment as like the last thing we put on a card, but I want these to have plenty of time to dry. Dye ink does dry relatively quickly, but that way it's not something I have to worry about smearing towards the end. And stamping directly onto your card, stamping your sentiment directly onto your card, can be a bit of a time saver, but this again allows me some room if I make a mistake. So I prefer to stamp it onto something else. So we'll take all of those and put them off to the side. A note about organizing and those sentiments that we just stamped is part of the reason I've used these. And these originally had something that you could use to attach them to a binder. I cut that off so that they would fit inside this larger zipper envelope. And now if I have to pause for the day, I can grab all of those sentiments and I can put them inside this bigger pouch, because I don't know like which cards, or I could just divide them in half or whatever. But this way I could actually potentially put everything in there. And if now I can put my stamp set away because I'm actually probably done with it. But if I wanted to keep my stamp set or my ink, my block, etc., it all fits inside of here and it's convenient for keeping organized. Okay, we are back to our trimmer and now we have our pattern paper. This cutting template tells me exactly how to cut the pattern paper. It tells me in width by height measurements. So this is 3.5 wide by 4 3/4 tall. And then it says what sketch that piece of paper is for in each area. The darker ones are for sketch 2, the lighter ones are for sketch 1. So I tried to kind of color code it as well. And so the first cut that I recommend that you make is for this 4 3/4 inch strip. So I can cut this so it's 12 by 4 3/4, and then I can cut these other smaller pieces off of it. You may want to cut off the branding strip if your pattern paper has one. This particular collection has these really pretty branding strips that I would recommend holding on to and maybe adding to the inside of your card. I recommend cutting this as shown off the top of the patterned paper. So this is my top because the branding strip is here. My paper is pretty non-directional. Technically there are some music notes on there that could look like they were sideways, but if you have directional pattern paper, this is a very important time to consider that. And you'll want to cut 4 3/4 off the top. I am holding all 3 sheets of my pattern paper together. My paper trimmer can cut 3 sheets at once. You can absolutely cut them all individually. And that way if you make a mistake, you have not made a mistake across all of them. But because I'm going to slow down to talk, I want to make sure that I am able to complete things. So, next thing that I need is a 3/4 inch strip off the edge. So, I am going to take my pattern paper, this 12-inch side, and I'm going to bring it to 11 1/4. And that's going to make this 3/4 of an inch. Cut that off. I need 2 sets of those. So I will do that again, and I will take a 3/4 inch back, which will bring me to 10 1/2. Make another cut. Now I've cut these 2 pieces off. Now I need to start cutting these larger chunks off. You want to make sure the top of your paper is currently at the top of the trimmer. I should have been more clear about that, but I think that most of you probably understood that. So we're going to come to 7 inches because that is 3 1/2 from our last cut. If you prefer, you can take your paper to the 3 1/2 and then again take that paper or stack of papers and bring it again to the 3 1/2. I tend to measure by pulling my paper like down the line of my trimmer, but you do what is comfortable for you. So now I have that first set of papers cut from the top. Coming back to my other chunk of pattern paper. Here's the bottom. Well, that's why part of the reason I'm keeping the branding strip on right now is so that it's clear to you where the bottom is. From the top, I'm going to cut the next 12-inch strip. I need to cut it to 12 inches by 4 inches. Of course, you have this and you can be reminded of all the measurements. But because this is a class for beginners and for people, just, all kinds of crafters, but I do want it to be beginner friendly. I'm really trying to be clear and walking you through each step. So we're going to take it to that 4-inch mark right there at the top of my trimmer and come down on it. I have a 4-inch by 12-inch piece. This one is a little bit different because I'm going to be cutting the piece first this way. So I'm going to take a piece that is 3 3/4. And then there's 2 pieces of it that add up to that 4 inches. So let's get that 3 3/4 first. And then that same piece needs to be turned so the top side is here. The top side, and then cut in half. So that 4-inch length cut in half to 2 by 3 3/4. Then take the rest of that chunk. That is now 4 inches by 8 1/4 about, and we're going to cut it to 2 3/4 each time. I know that the numbers, sometimes hearing a lot of numbers in a row can be a bit confusing. However, I hope that having that sheet for reference and allowing you to, take your time if you need to on that first go, but then you'll see that you'll get faster and this can take less time. But I'm also trying to take my time. So again, 2 3/4. This leftover piece will also be 2 3/4. Putting that off to the side. Okay. Now I haven't cut off my branding strip yet, but now we're going to do that. So here I have the top of the paper. And I need what's left. Now, if you don't have a branding strip, if you already cut that off, there's no need to make this cut. What you have left will be the 3 3/4 inch that you need. But I need to cut my branding strips off. Now, this might be a time where you would prefer to cut the papers individually so you can really make sure the branding strip comes off of each of them. So I'm going to take a moment, pause. I see that my layers underneath the branding strip did not come completely off of each of them, so I can briefly fix that. I can trim it off with a scissor if needed as well. Then I can stack my papers back up for the purposes of demonstration. Okay. Again, I think those branding strips are super cute. Hold on to them, you can put them inside your cards. Next, I'm going to need 2 3-inch pieces to cut off the end, and then some 2-inch pieces. So, I'll stack mine up. I'm going to take from 12 and measure 3 inches back. But again, if you want to just go to the 3-inch mark, that's totally fine. Now I'm going to bring it 3 more. So 12 minus 3 is 9. 9 minus 3 is 6. So now I have my 2 3-inch pieces, or my 2 stacks of 3-inch pieces. Depends if you're cutting one piece of paper or not. And then I'm going to cut some 2-inch pieces. So 6 minus 2 is 4, and 4 minus 2 is 2. Now, all of my pattern paper is cut. You can, if you cut only one sheet at a time, you can go through that process multiple times until you get all of your papers cut. Okay, so now I need to organize these into what card they go with for ease of assembly later on. I have sketch 1 and sketch 2 in my folders. These skinny strips, the 3/4 of an inch by 4.75, they go with sketch 2, so I'll place them on top. These 2-inch pieces, so I'm just using my template here as reference. You can measure them if you need to. Some of them might look more close than others, and so you might not be sure, oh, you know, which one of the pieces are these. One of the benefits of cutting them in stacks like this is I also can organize them a little bit more quickly. And also, since I created the sketch, I'm a little bit more sure of where each one goes. So I have these sets that are going to make my basic sketch 1, as you can see. Oh, well, sorry, it's not super obvious because they're all the same pattern. But that's the other pattern. We won't be using that, but we're using them as single-sided paper. That's the basic part of sketch 1. And so those are all the pieces that I need for it. And then, oh, you know, I must have something off a little bit, because I need my 2-inch pieces. Oh, some of those go over there. Okay. And then these are all the pieces that I need for sketch 2, and I could slip them inside so that I don't lose any of the pieces that I need. Now we're ready to start assembling our cards. Sketch 1, there's going to be 9 cards in all, so I should have 9 pieces of this large paper. This is the side that I chose for today's class, so I'm going to flip them over and add adhesive to the back. If you have single-sided paper, then the backs are going to be blank. Here, my backs were some of the larger, busier papers from the collection, which are super beautiful, great for scrapbooking and all that, but not what I'm using today. So sorry for anybody who, like, sometimes seeing the back of a paper, somebody's like, ooh, I would have loved that side better. I mean, obviously you can make that choice, but it's difficult sometimes because you're like, I see the potential, both sides of a pattern paper, and so not everyone always likes that. That's why I always recommend, if that's how you are, to just buy 2 sheets of a paper, because then you can use both sides and enjoy both sides fully. And I did purchase 2 sheets of this collection so that I could make the choice when I was ready. Now I have 6 pieces laid out and I'm adding adhesive across them all. I think that a tape runner makes the process faster because I can put tape runner on many, many pieces at one time, and then I can adhere them all down. If you're using liquid glue, it will lengthen the process. Might cause it to be over an hour. It's going to be hard for me to say, but I'm going to show you it in the way that I think will work. And so then I'm going to take these and I'm actually just going to adhere them right to each card, because the bottom sheet doesn't It doesn't really matter which one I use. I just have to start by making a decision, but we are going to mix the patterns across the cards. So as we go to the next sheet and we add another layer, we are going to be a little bit more concerned about which pattern is going on which card. For now, we're just getting started. We're just adhering these sheets down. I'm lining it up in the corner. If you want to make modifications to the sketch, you absolutely can. For example, you may want to put a mat around them. You can make your mat 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch bigger and cut it from colored cardstock. That's going to make the process take longer. That's okay. You don't have to make Christmas cards in under an hour. That is not something, I'm not trying to say that that is the best way to make Christmas cards. I'm just trying to show you that because I think some people get intimidated by the process and think card making has to take a long time. And I'm trying to break it down into some concrete steps too, so that you can see how you could make cards over several days in by breaking it up and watching, you know, and following along with 1 or 2 lessons each day, or even just part of a lesson. That would be totally fine as well. But I think the other way you could modify this sketch is instead of putting them all up in the corner like I am doing, you could actually just layer them all in the center of the card and go, you know, large, small, and then, sorry, large, medium, small, and just have everything, you know, centered. I was just trying to make it a little bit more dynamic by pushing it up into the corner. Okay, so now I have my second layer. And again, I'm flipping it all over to the opposite side that I chose. And I'm gonna do 6 at a time because I think that's what fits well on my workspace and in the camera so that you can see it. I have a tendency to like over add adhesive. I think 2 strips along each of these is probably fine. But sometimes I'll add extra adhesive because I want to make sure that my cards are really durable, that they last through the mail. So if I choose to put this light green paper on the star paper, that's great, but then I want to make sure my other piece of light green is also on the star paper so that I can make sure that I'm going to get to use all 3 patterns on each card. It's not too... If you mix them up and if you like get 2 pieces of star paper in one, it's totally fine. It's all about how you want to do it. But I'm giving you my suggestion so that if you want to, without having to think about it, just know like the method for doing it, that would be what I would do. So then I'm going to take star paper. It's going to go on top of this snowflake, and I'm just going to make sure my other star paper also goes on top of a snowflake. And we'll continue that as our decision-making process. We're going to make that decision one time and stick with it throughout all the cards. I did make sure that the pattern paper I chose, I thought would go well, no matter what order I put them in or how I used them. There was not like any right or wrong way to do it. And then each of these, I'm going to also put adhesive on, and then I'm going to just make sure whatever choice, because again, you could be using literally any pattern paper from your stash, making the same consistent choice. So for me, star went on snowflake, so I'm going to do that. Maybe you have polka dot goes on top of stripe, like whatever your decided method was. I have light green on top of star and snowflake on top of light green. Okay. Then we're ready to move to the next step. As you can see, by choosing these papers that are relatively small in pattern and pretty distinct in color, like one of them has this dark green base, one of them has a light green, and one is blue. They all look pretty different. Now I'm going to put all 9 of them out at one time because I can fit it all. Every pieces have gotten smaller over time. Get that adhesive on the back of all of them. And if you've purchased this class and you're not otherwise very familiar with my work, I am at jesscrafts.com and at YouTube at youtube.com/jesscrafts. But you'll find them on my website too. And I do a lot of this kind of card making where I use pattern paper and I follow a sketch and I make the same card multiple times, and it's because that is a way that makes, like, it works for me. It makes me happy to be able to make a lot of cards and really enjoy my cards, my card making process, by not having to make everything a really hard decision. I was not able to fully cut the branding strip off a few of these, so I'm just going to take my scissor and trim off that little bit of branding strip. It's probably not going to be a problem for you at this stage, but I just wanted to explain what I was doing there. And now these cards are complete. We're going to embellish them, but I'm going to put those off to the side, and then I'm going to keep going and figure out which, this little piece, it just goes on whichever card doesn't have that pattern yet. So, you know, I have a snowflake one. Oops, more branding strip. That's what I get for trying to cut 3 pieces at once. And I go, okay, this card, oh, did I mess up? Nope. Okay. This card doesn't have snowflakes yet. Line up my snowflakes. Okay, all along the edge there. So yeah, again, other things that if you are a little bit less familiar with me, I also like to donate a lot of my cards. So on jesscrafts.com, you will find many places that accept handmade greeting cards as donations. So if you would like to donate your cards, like if you really enjoy this process of making cards and you made your 15 to send to your family and you're like, this is really fun, I want to make 15 more, but I don't have any more people to send my cards to, then you can check that out and find some people who would benefit from what you love to do. Okay, so now we have those 9 cards completely assembled. I suppose I did bring in the scissor, which I did not put on my supply list, but I could have used my paper trimmer. And I can take all of these and put them back inside of that folder so that I keep them organized too. I pulled it out. I'm going to put the sketch off to the side for my reference, and then I have my 6 card bases and 6 of each piece of pattern paper that I need, and we're going to do the same thing where we just make sure that each card has a little bit of each pattern paper. If you look at the sketch, you'll notice that the bottommost layer that everything else is put on top of is this strip. So I'm going to take the strip that is 3/4 of an inch by 4 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to put the adhesive on that first, and we'll assemble the card starting with that piece. You can probably just put, again, 1 strip of tape. I'm just an over taper. It's just something that is a problem that I have to kind of be conscious of because I go through a lot of adhesive. But luckily I purchased that adhesive in bulk, so at least it doesn't become too much of a cost problem because I get that pretty inexpensive. Okay, so this again is a little bit of an eyeballing thing. I'm going to try to put as much space at the top and the bottom, just kind of keep it even, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a border here on the side. Just to bring it back to that, there's the A6 version, which is a little bit longer, but a little bit less wide. So on the A6 version, you may want to bring this strip even a little closer to the edge, but it should work out without too much of an issue. But I did want to point out that might be just because your card's a tiny bit thinner, you might want to leave a little bit less of a gap. And you can kind of learn from the first card if you want to assemble one completely and see, okay, was that a good amount from the edge? It's not something to worry too much about. If you do have a directional pattern paper, you'll want to make sure at this stage that you're keeping that in mind as you lay down each piece. The way that we cut them, it should not be a problem at all, but it's something to be mindful of as you're putting things down, because for me, my directionality is very subtle. It's in the music notes. Gotta confess, I never learned to read music, so I wouldn't know if music notes were up or down. Like maybe if it was a large sheet, I would kind of be like, oh, I think I know what to do. But when it's like just little bits of music notes, if they're upside down, I honestly wouldn't know. I would bet you most people wouldn't notice. Even if they do know how to read music, I still think most people wouldn't really notice that it was upside down when it's subtle like that. Because also most people are not going to be scrutinizing your card. I do want to make sure that this class stays in a very encouraging place because I love card making. It brings me a lot of joy. I love pretty pattern paper. I love giving someone something that feels really unique and special. So like, even though, you know, anybody who purchases this class and this pattern paper could make all the same cards, right? The person that you give this to is certainly probably not, I mean, I guess unless like everyone in your family takes the class and uses the same pattern, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, this is going to feel like a really unique and special card to them. So then I took the next piece in the order. So it's first the strip, and then it is the 3 3/4 by 2 inch that goes next. And I'm gonna put that again, just kind of towards the bottom half, maybe actually at around that halfway mark. It's not too specific. I just kind of think about like what looks good to me. And then I'm gonna just make sure, I should try to be consistent across. Again, so if I'm gonna put snowflake paper with light green. So then when I get back over to light green, I'm gonna pull in the snowflake paper. And that's again, just, I think it'll work out either way, as long as you just pick 2 different ones and then you pick the 3rd one for the last, should all be fine. But in case it's easier for you to be consistent across, that's what I'm doing. Okay. Then again, because I'm only making 6, I can easily just lay out my next 6 pieces. Fight the urge to over-adhere. Okay. So my ATG just ran out of adhesive. I'm gonna pause the class. I'm not gonna count that against myself because, you know, it wouldn't, the time that it takes to change this wouldn't necessarily matter, but I guess, you know, maybe have a backup adhesive on hand to keep it quick or something like that. But it will take me a few minutes to change out that adhesive. So if you do want to know how you would add adhesive to this particular tape runner, or if you want to know more about this particular tape runner because you're considering it as an option, there are some videos on my YouTube channel that will answer some of those questions. Okay, so I added adhesive to the back of each of those. And now the way the sketch calls for it is for it to be 3 inches across by 3 1/4 inches down. If you have non-directional pattern paper, like I do in this instance, then it doesn't particularly matter which way you put it. But if your paper is directional, you will of course want to put it in the way that is prescribed on the sketch. But I just want to offer that there is a flexibility. If you like the wider side across, as long as, you know, it works for your pattern paper, go for it. Again, you could add mats to this card. So if you're looking at this and you think, oh, you know, I think it would actually look a lot better if it was broken up, the patterns weren't laying on top of each other, absolutely add whatever amount of mats feels comfortable to you. And, you know, always adapt this, but I want to show you the basics. Okay, so 3 more, continuing to add them across. Is that upside down? Here we go with these music notes again. This is like the biggest chunk of it, so maybe I should try to get that one right. Sometimes the back will give you a clue too, because like I know that the houses are facing up on this back side, so when I flip it over, that's technically the top. It absolutely doesn't matter for that snowflake paper, but I do know that because of that hint. And you could also like say, you know, you really wanted to make sure that this was done correctly. You could of course draw like an arrow on the back or something like that, since you know you're not going to be using the back of the paper. Okay. Anyway, then we have those 6 cards adhered. And again, to keep things organized, I could put them back in the folder. Let's return to sketch 1. So I have my 9 cards from sketch 1. And I'm now going to pick my embellishments or ephemera. I think I'm going to try to do several at once. So in that instance, I am going to take, so you're going to make 9 cards and there's going to be sets of 3 that match. So I will have 3 that have my light green paper in the corner, the top corner, 3 that have the star, and 3 that have the snowflake. I can embellish these in sets of 3, or I can fit 6 on the screen or something like that. I'm gonna go to my ephemera. This collection actually has a lot of pink in it. None of my pattern papers that I chose are pink. It was partly because these were like more generic holiday. They only had like the stars and the snowflakes, which bring out the holiday season and read as Christmas if you want them to be Christmas cards, or it could just be sort of winter cards so that they don't have to be given at Christmas. I could probably stamp a winter sentiment instead of season's greetings, and that would be actually helpful to a lot of places when they accept donations. They do get a lot of Christmas cards in particular, and so they might be a little bit happier if they, not happier is not the right word, but they might have more use for cards that aren't Christmas because they have a ton of Christmas cards already. Okay, so in this case, where I am going to want to work quickly, I'm trying to try not to overthink my choices. If I like something, I'm just gonna go with it. Okay, so we have this deer. He would be super cute and easy to use. I'm not sure I like, so this particular pack of embellishments has these little bit of extra bits that have to come off. I don't know if I've ever seen that before in a pack of embellishments, but I did want to point that out in case this is the first pack you've ever received, that there might be those little bits. I have seen that before. So you might want to, there might be little bits that you have to kind of take off. A Christmas wreath would potentially go well. Now I do realize certain embellishments, if I add them, are going to make it feel more and less Christmassy. I am okay with making these into Christmas cards though. I just wanted to be, not that I was like forced to make them into Christmas cards. Okay, those are, I don't love the inside of the wreath adding all that extra pattern. So I'll give it a few more tries to find something that I like. Santa is so cute. Okay. Yeah, I think that the Christmas ornaments to me are one of those like the easiest embellishments to use. Some of the embellishments are quite large, and so I don't think they're gonna work necessarily very well for these cards, but if you make larger cards, or if you turn any of the cards on their side, and because these are non-directional pattern papers, the ones that I chose, you could do that with any of these, but I think I'm gonna stick with it as planned for today. This one will probably look good here and maybe not on some other ones, because if I put it on top of the green, it'll blend in too much. All right, we're not overthinking it. So now we're just gonna adhere these down. We're just gonna be happy with it. We'll put a little bit of adhesive on the back of each one. You could, if you are familiar and if you like it, put some foam tape on the back of these to make them kind of stand off the card a bit more. I think that would look really cute. It again is a little bit more time consuming, I think, to put foam tape, but I think it's absolutely worth it if that is something that you enjoy to do. Okay, and then we're going to need to put our sentiments on. Let's grab our sentiment strips and flip them to the back side. Make sure there's any one that you grab is one that you were happy with. And I'm actually gonna put adhesive all down the strip before I do any cutting apart. That could be a little bit wasteful because I am gonna cut some of this adhesive off, but I think overall it will be faster. So what I'm gonna do is, if I want the sentiment to be on the side of the card, I'm gonna cut that flat edge, and then the other side I'm gonna cut at a slight angle, just to give it a little bit more interest. So flat edge, angle. This is generally going to work for all of the cards, but if there's an instance where the thing that you chose is facing in the direction, so like Santa's eyes are kind of, I mean, they're closed, but they're facing downward. So they're directing you towards this area for the sentiment. The reindeer is looking in this direction, so it makes sense for the sentiment to be in this direction. Also, everything on the card is butted up against this edge. So I like that look, and most of the time, that is what I am personally going to choose in terms of how I want to put my sentiment. And I'm cutting these all with scissors, which again, I totally didn't tell you scissors were a supply at the beginning. And so I apologize about that, but you could be doing that with a trimmer. And I do think most people have a scissor available somewhere in the house. All right, let's go a little bit faster. I got slowed down in my distraction about feeling bad about missing up that scissor requirement. Okay. That's pretty big, but I still think it looks great. So I do think you could definitely use some of the larger pieces. Don't shy away from them. Don't dismiss them completely, for sure. And oh, another adorable Santa, but he's facing in the other direction. So we'll talk about how we're going to make that work, because that is what I mentioned about the sentiment earlier and the different decisions I might make. Okay, I don't know, maybe there's a top and bottom to this poinsettia situation, but I'm just going to put it in whatever way looks good to me and just let it be. So, okay, not overthinking it. I like literally have to like chant that to myself. I'm sure some of you totally get it. Oh, gotta take that little bit out extra there. Okay, so we had that adhesive on the back of our sentiments. This scissor does have a non-stick blade, so the adhesive isn't gumming it up. That might be something worth considering if you aren't sure what scissor to buy. Having a non-stick scissor as a crafter can be helpful. So Santa is facing in this direction. If I follow his eyes down, I probably want to put the sentiment on this side instead. So I'm just going to cut it opposite, where I cut the flat edge next to seasons instead of next to greetings, and then the slanted edge on the greetings side. Okay, and keep going. This one I think is again just fine to do it the standard way that I've been doing it all along. You know, I don't think, for those of you who are curious, I'm gonna include cleanup time in my hour, because I know partly cleanup time is different for different people, like how much you feel like you need to clean things up, but it's just kind of amusing me as I am throwing things around on my desk. I'm like, oh, well, you know, somebody's gonna have to clean that up later, and I think it's probably gonna have to be me. I'm gonna go to the second half of that ephemera pack here. Oh, I did not open them all the way. Okay. There is a couple of sentiments in this pack, and you could absolutely just put that Merry Christmas down. I don't actually like it on this card. I mean, it's fine, but this, I kind of don't like the dark green on dark green. Sometimes sentiment or sometimes ephemera packs will have multiple of the same embellishment. So if you get like 2 cardinals in each one, and then when you pick it for a card, you could just make the other card also have a cardinal. And that kind of, oh my gosh, how cute is that? Santa on a bicycle. We'll probably have to use him at some point, even if he doesn't fit on today's cards, because boy, is he adorable. All right, I'm gonna put this one because I want it to keep in that less Christmassy space. I think a lot of people enjoy hot chocolate regardless of Christmas. I start drinking hot chocolate in like October. As soon as it gets cold, I'm all ready for some hot chocolate. Okay, oh, there's a little piece in between these birds' legs as well. So we're popping that out, adding some adhesive. And you want to balance it across the layers so that you like how much of each layer is sticking out. And again, coming to a couple of strips of your sentiments that we prepared earlier, running it all along. If the papers that you chose don't really work well with a white card base or white sentiments, that's totally fine. You could be doing this on craft cardstock or any colored cardstock. You might just need to choose a different color of ink so that it stands out. I do think this dark blue would look totally fine on craft cardstock, for example, but if your pattern paper doesn't look particularly great on a white card base, you could totally be picking out colored cardstock for your card base. There is flexibility within that, but I was trying to kind of show you the most basic way of doing it in like white cardstock, white cards, because when you buy card bases pre-made, they are often white. And so now we have all of those cards made. Bring out sketch number 2. I have all of my embellishments still out all over my desk because I'm making this in a more continuous hour than you might be, but that's why, again, it's nice to have that little pouch if you needed to put things away in between. We're gonna really quickly pick some things out. This should be super easy to do, and honestly, this is the kind of card where I might consider not even putting a sentiment. And I know not everyone likes that, but because if there's something really interesting to look at, to me that's often enough. But that's a decision that I totally understand each person is going to make for themselves about whether or not it's really important for them to have that sentiment there. And that's why I made sure that we prepared enough sentiments. So regardless of what I choose to do, you can, feel like you can quickly finish that up. Because there's mostly blue there, I think that Christmas tree works out a little bit better. I love this snowman. He's pretty cute, but I think he works pretty well on that blue paper. So I had to use that Santa. Even though he's really big, I think he works well on this sketch. Even the other sketch, I don't think he worked as well on. And that was one of the reasons that while I typically only make one card from one piece of 12 by 12 or whatever size pattern paper, when I do my paper busting templates, that's what I call them, when I take one piece of pattern paper and make a bunch of cards with no scraps. I do it with all kinds, 6 by 6, 6 by 8. I mean, this is just for people who aren't, who found this class some way and they don't know me yet. I usually I make the same card multiple times, but when I make 2 cards, it does give you a little bit of a choice there, and you can go, okay, well, this embellishment that I like didn't work well on one, but I can give it a try on the other. I can give it a try with the different patterns and make it work. Okay, so we'll punch that out. I think you can see there's like a little hole here. I know some people, like if there's a hole, they feel like they have to fill it, like you have to put a string in it or something. You can absolutely do that if that's what makes your heart happy. No worries. I'm not going to today because I don't think it needs it, but I think it would look super cute. So we'll stick that down, and then we've been relatively fast. I absolutely think we have enough time to add sentiments, even though, again, I don't know that these cards need them. I can also, when you're cutting your sentiments, if you, instead of cutting the banner like on a diagonal downwards, you can cut a diagonal upwards. I do suggest putting the flat edge up against the edge of a pattern paper. So whichever layer you pick for it, like say for this Santa, he doesn't actually have a lot of room on him. Oh, sorry, he's a little bit out of frame. I'm thinking about him specifically right now, and I'm thinking if I cut it going up, there's a little more room at the top, and oof, the season's greeting doesn't quite even fit with him. I could tuck it underneath him a little bit if I want. I could bring it off. I could line it up with the edge of the card. There's some choices, but absolutely just feel free to even leave it off. Even if it's not butted up against the edge of the card, I still think it looks great. There's no problem with doing that. I just want to talk a little bit about those decisions, as I do think that from, talking to people over the years, that is something that people get tripped up on a little bit, is like, okay, well, how do you make some of these decisions? How do you know what looks good? And it's things like, looking where the eyes are looking when you have that. As I mentioned before, it's thinking about the space. It's, grounding things by putting them on the edge. And then once you know those rules, you can use them when it makes sense. And then when you're like, you know what, this rule is not serving me, don't be afraid to break those rules, because they're not actually rules in art. They're just like guidelines, suggestions. And this Christmas tree, he also looks like he doesn't have a lot of room. Oof, I think I'm centering these embellishments is changing how I might add the sentiment, because I don't need to balance out this area. So putting it here would cause a little bit of a off balance because this is centered and therefore it is balanced. And so then I'm choosing to put the sentiment somewhere else on the card. Okay, one more strip of sentiments because I have 2 more cards that need them. Oh, so gingerbread man, I'm going to do just like I did the ornament. and I can cut the little slant in the opposite direction. So if you feel like one or the other makes sense, just want to point that out again, as I had 2 cards that I'd done similarly. Ooh, I think I could do this one. Although that Season's Greeting is stamped pretty crooked. Maybe this is the instance where having those extras is gonna pay off, because, I don't know, a little crooked even for me. Even for me who accepts imperfection in my card making, I was like, no, that's where I'm gonna draw the line. And then we'll do something similar where we put it in the corner. Ooh, that's still a little too big. Sometimes just trimming it up more can make the difference, but I do like to try to keep it even on both sides. So if there's only a little bit of space on one side, there's only a little bit of space on the other side. Well, guys, we did it. We made 15 cards in under an hour. We have, our Christmas list is maybe done. Maybe we made a big chunk in it, and now we're ready to take 3 more pieces of pattern paper and get them out of our stash and really enjoy using them. Or if you are a newer crafter and you didn't pull from your stash, you purchased these just for this, that you feel accomplished that, you don't have, that you really fully used those supplies that you went out and purchased, and you had a great time, and you feel confident that you can go forward and make more cards. You can do this whole process over again and make 15 additional cards for, Valentine's Day that might be coming up next, or for all the birthdays that you want to give out in the year. Again, remember, if you gave them a card one year, switch them off. So remember who got sketch 1 and sketch 2 or something like that if you want. Or, you'll go check out jesscrafts.com and get some additional resources and learn some more about card making. But I really wanted to create a comprehensive class where you were able to go start to finish and feel like, it was a really succinct process. You got a really nice group of cards that coordinates really beautifully together, and you could give these as a gift too. Take 5 cards, 3 of one and 2 of the other, or however you want to do it, and now you have gift sets. I mean, these cards are gorgeous. Somebody's going to really enjoy being able to give these out, feel proud of these. You should feel absolutely proud for making them. But now you have this giftable thing. And they all coordinate so beautifully. So that really helps to highlight the giftability of it. Again, if you prefer A6 cards, remember that we could totally make this whole thing in A6 as well. They won't look all that different. It all works out well. Thank you so much for joining me for this class. If it's the holiday season, happy holidays. If it's outside of that season, happy crafting. I guess happy crafting either way. But I had a really great time with you, and I hope that you enjoyed the process as well.